Hey everybody, this is Corbett from Think Traffic, and today I'm sitting down with James Clear from Passive Panda. James has a pretty cool story that I wanted to share with you all because he has been able to start a blog in a relatively competitive niche and build it up into not only a very popular site, but also a site that is creating a full-time income for him in just a matter of about 6 months or so. James, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks so much for having me, Corbett. I really appreciate it. And I just want to say before we get started, I love what you do at Think Traffic, and I've been following the site for quite a while now. So it's great just to be able to talk some more and be on the site.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. And you and I guess we've been talking a bit, just sort of casually, over Skype or whatever for the past, I guess maybe since about the time you started.
Yeah,
And
pretty much.
kind of checked in here and there. And I've been watching your progress and I've been really excited about it. And I haven't really had a chance to help at all or contribute to it, but we've just checked in and you've done so well that I thought some people, especially beginning bloggers, would be interested in hearing your story and finding about your secrets and how you've gotten to where you are so quickly. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. I mean, you have definitely helped, even if it's just from reading Think Traffic. And I'm not sure if I have any secrets, but I'll do my best to tell you whatever I got and what I've done so far. So I'm happy to share.
Okay, cool. Well, I'd like to start maybe just by recapping some of the numbers that you shared with me before we started recording this, because a few of them are pretty impressive. Starting out with let's say your unique visitors for last month. You mentioned your blog is now just about 8 months old, right?
Right. Yeah. This is starting the ninth month now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And how many unique visitors did you have last month that you mentioned?
Last month there were 120,000 uniques.
That's impressive. I mean, that's a lot of visitors.
Yeah, and I mean it was much more than I had before as well. So like things just keep growing and escalating. Before that point, I was anywhere between like 30 and 50,000 uniques, and I would imagine this month might be back around that again or not. I don't know. I had a couple things that happened. We can talk about that that led to the increase in traffic, but it's definitely the traffic metrics have been good. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely, and that's led to both a decent number of subscribers and also product sales, which we'll get into, I guess. But you've built up quite a decent subscriber base from that traffic as well, right?
Yeah, I like to. I mean, I try to focus on conversions as much as I can. I don't. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm an expert in conversions or anything like that, but it seems that I have a couple of pages and tactics that work pretty well. And right now, the email list, my newsletter is at about 3,000 email subscribers, and then I have a separate list for the webinars I run, and that's at about 2,000. And then I think there's like an extra 1,000 or so RSS, but I don't pay too much attention to that. So there's probably a little overlap between them. I get them from mostly different places, but I would say all told, it's 5,000 plus or so for the subscribers.
Yeah, that's great. I think anybody at 8 months would be happy with those numbers. I think if you look at a lot of the bigger bloggers back at their first year or so, I think a lot of them were happy to get to 5,000 or even maybe 2 or 3,000 in the first year. So congrats on that. That's pretty quick growth.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know. It's hard. You don't want to compare yourself because everybody's site's different, and like so the different market or the different approach you take or whatever your unique selling proposition is or whatever, that's going to change it. But I think it's in a pretty good spot. Based on the growth I've had in the last couple months or so, like I mean, this month alone, I've added like I think 1,300 email subscribers. So it's picking up much more than it was in the beginning. So I know. I know what people are, what they say when it's like, yeah, well, my first year, I'd just be happy if I could get to 2,000 or so, but it sort of hits that snowball portion where it just sort of escalates. So it's a lot faster, and I don't know. I'd like to get to 10,000 by the end of the year. I think that's doable, and it'd be a nice stretch goal for me. So we'll see where it goes.
So for people who aren't familiar, let's just introduce the site a little bit. First off, Passive Panda is in the make money niche. Not necessarily make money online, but you definitely talk about how to make money along with other things. Why did you start a blog in that niche, knowing how many are out there, and how is Passive Panda different from the other sites that are already out there?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll answer both parts. The first is why did I do that? I think that um, there's my personal story to it, and then there's also just the marketing story behind it. And the marketing story is that big markets can handle more marketers. So like I wouldn't necessarily be worried about competition. Like there's all these sites in the personal development niche or niche or the make money niche or whatever it is, right? Because those are really big markets, so they can handle more people coming in. There's always space for someone new. So I wasn't really worried about the fact that, oh, everybody's already doing this, or, there are other great sites out there on this. There's plenty of space for your voice in a large market. My personal story for it is that so I was fortunate, and I went to undergrad and grad school, and I was able to get scholarships for those, so I didn't have to take out any debt. And one of my big passions is medicine and healthcare. I worked at a medical practice before, and so the goal for me once I got out of business school was to build a business that could fund me going to medical school. So that's like why I started Passive Panda, and why I started it. And a lot of the considerations I had at the time were financial or money, or like how's this all going to work? So it was things that I was interested in. The other portion, and this plays into what makes Passive Panda unique, is that I talk about 5 areas of earning more money, and those are freelancing awards, so like scholarships, or a free hotel stay or a free airline ticket, so some type of award for a monetary amount. The freelancing awards, investing, which I don't cover too much yet, employment, and entrepreneurship. So those are sort of the 5 areas that you can earn more money in, and I try to touch on each one of those. And then the common theme that pulls them all together is spreading your message and getting people to buy into your ideas. Because if you can do that, and so that's why I talk a lot about networking and really just the marketing aspects behind it. Because if you can do that, regardless of which of those 5 you try to do, if you can do that well and spread your message, then you're going to be able to earn more money. So that's why sometimes I touch on the career aspects of things, or an interview article, as opposed to just entrepreneurship stuff or just how to make money online stuff, because everybody's in a different position. Like when I started the site, I was in a position where I really wanted to do this entrepreneurial thing, but I also had this freelancing stuff on the side where I would do web design and graphic design, and that worked best for my situation. So a lot of times I think the make money online sites, while they provide some good information, depending on which ones you go to, they don't fit everybody's situation the right way. So I try to give people the information that they need, and they can decide what works for them.
Mm. And how much of this philosophy was sort of intact when you launched the site versus, has it changed along the way? And have you adapted because you found that you could get some traction? The traffic, for instance, that you've gotten recently, is that because you've changed your philosophy, or because you've changed your tactics maybe?
So I wouldn't say the philosophy of the site has changed that much. I mean, from the beginning, my main goal was to help people and to do something that could allow me to make an impact. And ultimately, like I said, medicine is my passion. So ultimately, it could make me a better doctor or a better person. And so like improving people's financial situation, improving the way that they approach their lifestyle and the type of work that they're doing, that was always the underlying goal. Now, the way that I went about it has definitely changed. And I think that's important for any site. So if you look at a large company like Apple, right? I mean, how many times have they pivoted and offered a new product? They went from, the Mac to the iPad to, the iPod. Everything they've offered has been so different and groundbreaking. And if you want to be a really good company, regardless of whether you're big or small, you have to pivot and change and evolve, right? And so I think that's important. I don't think it's a bad thing. But when I started, I definitely was thinking more of like the passive income type of thing, which is why I went with the name Passive Panda. But it evolved into all types of income. And so, and I had more experience in awards and winning, type of scholarships and things like that, as well as the freelancing aspect, and then the entrepreneurship. And I had worked in a medical practice for a little while, so I had some of the career and employment background. And I was like, well, I sort of have all these pieces. How can I pull them together and make this the most beneficial?
Mm-hmm. So tell us about the early days. How did you first get people to pay attention to the site, and then bring us up to today, which you mentioned some really impressive sites have linked to you, like Lifehacker and U.S. News or something. Can you tell us sort of about how you've evolved that process?
Sure. So I think, still probably very few people know me now, which, not a big deal. But in the beginning, like no one knows who you are, right? So I did a roundup post of a bunch of freelancers and service providers, and just a side note for anybody watching, that's probably the quickest and best way to make money from your website if you're looking to do that, like right away. Like you can get, if you have an expertise or any topic that you focused on, you can be a coach or consultant tomorrow, right? Like you don't have to worry about all this product creation or figuring out the digital download stuff or all this extra stuff. You can offer your services right away. So I went and talked to, I think it was 31 people online who have websites and are service providers and coaches, consultants, freelancers. and I did a roundup post of them. So that was like the first 5-part series I did that first week, and that just helped get my name out there. And my main goal is just to make connections with those people who already had sites and just be like, hey, I exist, like just let them know that I was there. So that went well. And then for the next couple months, main driver of traffic was guest posts. So I started testing all types of different sites, like subscriber sites and everything. And what I found was any site that has over about 50,000 RSS subscribers was probably going to send the type of traffic that made the amount of effort for the article worth it for me. So that was it wasn't like I did a couple of guest posts for people who had smaller sites, only had like 3,000 or 5,000 subscribers, but I did it because we were friends. And I would say if that 50,000 mark is a pretty good barometer for if you can get on a site larger than that, it's going to be worth your time to take a couple hours and write an article because they'll send enough traffic and subscribers.
Right. Of course, the exception is maybe if you can find a site that's very overlapped with what you're talking about. If it's a really good fit, then sometimes.
Yeah, so just some conversions. I don't know if you're interested in this, but for the guest post, like for the not very targeted sites, those typically convert about 6 to 10% of the traffic they send to me into subscribers. But then I've had like really targeted ones that like 20 to 30% of the people they send will sign up. And so that's pretty good. But the other thing that I try to tell people is don't get too hung up just on percentages of conversions, because if it's a really big site, even if it's not as targeted, I would rather have it converted 6% and send me 100 subscribers than a small site converted 20% and only send me 15.
Sure.
So sometimes the raw numbers are worth considering.
Are you sending those people to a landing page, or are they just coming to the homepage of your site?
So the best I can, if you want to talk a little more about the conversion stuff, I have the best converting pages. I can just talk about those a little bit. So my homepage converts at about 7.5 or 8%, which is pretty good overall. And I have that like feature box, which was an idea I got from Derek Halpern, and put that at the top, and so that works pretty well. And then another place that I often send people through the guest posts is I just have a dedicated newsletter landing page, and that converts pretty well also. So I do try to send them to a landing page as opposed to just a random page. So those are usually the two that I link to in my signature on the guest posts, or home pages and that newsletter page.
Cool. All right. So you started out, you said that you did a roundup post and that worked pretty well. Then you went on to guest posting. You did that for a couple of months. Are you still doing guest posts today? Is that still part of your strategy?
Yeah. And now I'm like a staff writer for American Express Open Forum, so that works pretty well for me. And that's a good credibility and branding one too. So it's nice to get the word out there. But then I've also transitioned to trying to get more mainstream media to pay attention a little bit more and just see how that whole syndication process works and how beneficial that's been. So some of the places that you mentioned earlier that have linked to Passive Panda so far have been U.S. News and World Report. I actually wrote a couple guest posts for them, and then they interviewed me for another article. And Lifehacker has linked to 2 of my articles now, and they send obviously a lot of traffic because they're a very big site. Alltop and Guy Kawasaki, his like Twitter account has linked to, I don't know, maybe 5 or 8 of my articles at this point. So they've sent some good traffic my way. So those mainstream media sources have been good as well.
So how do you go about, let's break down a couple of those if you don't mind. So how do you go about getting Lifehacker to link to you, for example?
Yeah, that one, I wish I had like a really sexy story to tell on that, but it's not as good as you would think. I just a side note here. I remember watching a couple like interviews of, bigger name people in the blogosphere and stuff when I was getting started. And I would hear about how they got like, some big mainstream mention or whatever. And they'd be like, yeah, I just wrote the best article possible and someone picked it up. I'd be like, you kidding me? Like, is that really, like you got to know somebody, right? But the one thing I will say is that if you're consistent and just try to put out the best content possible, at some point, someone will pick it up. There's like just way too many eyeballs out there for someone not to see it. Yeah. So for Lifehacker, the first article they linked to was an article I wrote called 99 Interview Tips That'll Actually Get You a Job. And I surveyed over like 75 people for that article. So I put like a lot of work into it and really tried to make it tactical and actionable and not just like, shine your shoes before you go to your interview or whatever. And so they really liked that article. They were like, this is really practical. And I actually just sent it through their tips line. It's just like tips at Lifehacker. And they were like, yeah, this looks great. And they didn't say anything, so I didn't know if they were going to run it. And then like 2 days later it was up, and I think they were sending me like 10,000 people in the first day or so. So that was great. And then the second time they picked it up, it was sort of the same thing. I sent them the article, and that one was how to email important people, 5 tips you need to know. So it was just like a tactical, I used like screenshots and stuff and talked about how I got in touch with some bigger names. And they like that one as well. But that one, once you get through their tips line, sometimes their authors and stuff will email you and be like, hey, we ran this article on you. So then you don't really have to go through the tips anymore. You can just email the author right away,
Nice.
So that was how that one worked. And then Alltop was a better story because I went and contacted the editor directly. And you can do this for all types of things. So I tell people a lot of times if you're looking to get like an article in the New York Times or USA Today or whatever it is, right? You can always look to see who wrote the article, right? Or who writes stuff that's relevant to what you're looking for. And then because at that process, you know where you want to be, but you don't know who you need to talk to. Mm-hmm. Well, just find who's writing about similar articles, then just reach out to that editor and just send them an email. And I put together a full course on how to write stuff like that, but that's the basic strategy I took. And I just got in touch with that editor at Alltop and told them that, most of the stuff I write doesn't fit your guys' style, but this one does, and I think you really like it. And it was on their site like 2 hours after I sent that. So that one worked out really well.
Awesome. And then that's led to repeated exposure, you said?
Yeah, now my site, Passive Panda is actually listed on Alltop's site under the personal finance and entrepreneurship sections, I think. And now they like look for it. And it's, that's been great. So they link to usually about one article a month.
Cool. And then US News, how'd you get in touch with them?
So this one comes just from like talking to people in your space. When I was first starting out, because Passive Panda sort of fits in that, like, it's small business, it's entrepreneurship, it's career, and it's like personal finance, and it's all sort of at the intersection of those. And so I was trying to talk to a lot of personal finance people when I was starting up. And Baker from Man vs. Debt was great. He was able to talk to me a lot and give me some great advice. And Ryan from Cash Money Life was nice. We actually all were at dinner together. And Ryan was telling me about Kim Palmer, who works at US News, and he was just saying, yeah, you need to check her out, like send her an email, tell her you know me, and just say hi. And so I did, and I talked to Kim about her latest book and stuff, and then just a couple months later, she emailed me and she's like, hey, I'd love to interview you for this article I'm writing on US News. And so I was like, sure, that'd be great. And then I ended up writing a guest post or 2 over there as well, and that sent a lot of subscribers my way. I actually got featured on Yahoo Finance because of one of the articles I wrote on there. So it just helps to make connections and reach out to people. Like, I'm sure you probably realize this, like, you have a massive audience at Think Traffic, right? But it's in comparison to the amount of people that reach out and say hello, it's actually a really small number of people who like actually reach out and talk to you,
right,
compared to all the people who are reading.
Sure.
So like no one ever takes the time to do that. So I just try to, I could be better at it, but I just try to reach out and say hello and, and get to know people, because those connections and those relationships, that's what really like makes it work. I mean, the blogosphere seems big because there's so many people reading, but there's really not that many players in the niche, like there's not that many sites. Like after a year or so, you get to know everybody. So you just, if you can build those relationships, like that's the best way to keep it going.
Yeah. All right. So we've mentioned a bunch of great techniques. I just want to summarize a little bit so far. So you said roundup posts where you reach out to a lot of people. Those are good. You said networking is good, getting in touch with people, meeting them face-to-face occasionally, because those can lead to things. Sometimes just reaching out to people in general, contacting them one-off and seeing if you can start some sort of conversation that way. You did some submissions just through general. I think some people forget about that. You can actually submit to Lifehacker and other sites, and sometimes you get picked up that way. All of this, though, I think is predicated, as you said earlier, on having great content, right? Like writing outstanding stuff. If you had to break down in your mind what makes an outstanding article, the type of thing that's worthy of being on Lifehacker, worthy of being on an Alltop, what are the components of that you really try to bake in?
Well, the first thing is I rarely talk about my personal like stuff on there. I try to focus purely on the customer or the client or the reader, right? So I try to just give stuff that's as useful as possible for them. Not that writing about your personal story isn't bad, but I think a lot of people sort of convince themselves that, oh, I'm interesting, or my story's interesting, so people will pay attention. But people buy into results. They don't really buy into like ideas or products or services. Like it doesn't matter if you offer a product or a service or a story. It needs to provide a result for them, or something they think can give them a result. So I would say that's the first thing. But the other thing is that this is like a copywriting technique that a lot of people don't really think about. You need to really think about the underlying desire that, like, you can't create desire. I think a lot of people think, oh, my story will create desire in people because they'll be interested because I'm interesting. But for example, I talked about this before and previously with someone, P90X, right? Like it's a really popular fitness workout like regime or what, that's sort of coming over now. And they didn't invent the desire to lose weight or to get in shape, right? They just addressed it. So whatever your site is or whatever the article is you're writing about, like, you can't invent the desire that you're going to talk to, but you can come at it in a unique way or in a different way. But don't convince yourself that just because you think something's interesting, people have a desire to read it. So that's another thing. And then the last thing is just that it takes effort. Like I don't really, I mean, I try to consider most of the time whenever I do something, I like to think that everyone I'm competing against is smarter than me, has more money than me, and has more experience than me. But even if you're really, really smart, it doesn't matter if you don't put a lot of effort into it. Like, effort matters. There's a bunch of research actually that shows NBA players, basketball players, in their contract year. So when they're coming up for a new contract and they have the possibility of earning a lot more money, they actually play much better. And it's because of the amount of effort that they put in that year, because they're like, hey, I could have a huge multi-million-dollar payoff, so I need to really try. Yeah. So even at a really high level of talent and skill, effort matters. And so, like, for that interview tips article I wrote, I interviewed over 75 people for that article just to try to get tactical tips that really work in the real world. Or the email article I wrote, that's another really popular article on my site. And I did my best to use real examples and screenshots and like give, put numbers to things. How long did it take for these people to get back to me? And if you can like just put real value in, and it doesn't mean, I think a lot of times the word value gets thrown around and people are just like, okay, what does that mean? Like, make a valuable article. But you need to put effort into it and, try to quantify things, give people proof and evidence, and and talk to people other than yourself who really know. If you can do that, then I don't know. Like I said, I don't have all the answers, but that's what's worked well for me so far.
One other thing that I'd like to throw in there that I've noticed you do well is headlines. Especially like you mentioned, I think the first one was 99 interview tips that will actually land you a job. Something like that. So that headline is interesting because it, obviously it has the quantification. People love to know what they're going to get. They're going to get 99 tips, but you build the desire in there because what people want is a job. And so you say it's going to land you a job, and then you pique their curiosity by adding credibility to the fact that it's actually going to get you a job. Whereas you're saying probably most of the other interview tips that you've heard are useless. They're out there, right? So there's a lot of complexity that you built into that headline, and I think that's part of what made that article so compelling.
Yeah, headlines are really important. I don't know. I don't consider myself a great copywriter. It's something I'm trying to get a lot better at. But most people only read the headline, and I have relatively good social metrics, I think, for the size of my site, as far as like retweets and Facebook shares and stuff. Like, one of the articles that wasn't really picked up by mainstream media but still performed pretty well is called 10 self-promotion tips that aren't sleazy. And that one's, I think that's been shared like almost 2,000 times on social networks and stuff. I think like 500 tweets or shares and all that stuff. And that's performed really well, I think, because the headline grabbed people. A lot of people share things just because of the headline. Like, most people don't even read to the end of an article, but if they like the headline and they read one or two tips and they're like, okay, I like this, boom, share. Right. So yeah, headlines are very important.
I like also that you have not sort of bound yourself into a box of only writing articles about making money. You've written a lot about, like you said, self-promotion tips that aren't sleazy. Obviously, self-promotion is important for entrepreneurship and other things, but a lot of people, I think if they were just focused on, one niche, they might lock themselves into a box and they might miss opportunities to write on interesting topics that could get shared and open them up to a whole new audience.
Yeah, I try to write evergreen and timeless stuff. And a lot of times I think the tactics that work for that, like if you're an effective self promoter or an effective networker, that's going to work regardless. There's like the tactic for, for building a great niche site that might work this month, but it might not be that great like 3 months from now. So I try not to focus as much on that stuff. Not that it's bad, it's just the approach that I take.
Yeah. Cool. All right. And then I wanted to talk about how this is translated into a business for you, because traffic and subscribers and everything are great. But ultimately, I think a lot of people watching this probably are hoping to build a business around a blog. And you've already had success with that. You mentioned that Passive Panda is your full-time employment, so to speak, and that it's been bringing in a full-time income at about the 6-month mark or so. You were able to
yeah, I'd say it was probably about 6 or 7 months in. When I first started, the first I got about the first 4 months or so, I did some freelance work on the side, which worked out great for the site because that's a topic I talk about a lot. So it's nice to have, real world experience you can pull. But once I launched 2 products and then I kept one of them. So that's that's another thing about having a site is you're going to make plenty of mistakes, right? So I launched my best-selling course, which is my email course, and that's just how to email important people, and it's like networking and self-promotion tips, and that's delivered over a 4-week span. So you get like 1 lesson a day for 4 weeks, and that course sells pretty well. I typically sell it over webinars. I've sold. One nice thing about the traffic is that you'll just sell some randomly as well, right, from people coming to the site. But most of the time on webinars is where I make most of the sales, and that typically converts about 10 to 20%, depending on the type of traffic that's on the webinar or type of people that come. But 10 to 20% of people usually end up buying that. So, if I get 100 people on, then that's 15 sales or so. And so that's nice. And that product's selling for about $99. So I try to do webinars as much as I can. I don't know. Now I'm looking for like bigger partners and people to work with, but I'm open to doing them whenever. So that's usually the business strategy, I guess you could say, that I've employed that's worked the best to this point. But yeah, after about 6 months, I pretty much have just been doing Passive Panda. I don't really do the freelance stuff anymore.
Cool. That's awesome. I mean, I think we've talked a lot on the site at Think Traffic about what it takes to build a business around a blog and what people should expect. And I think the general guideline is you really shouldn't expect anything for a year, and usually 18 to 24 months is about what it takes for someone to build up sort of a full-time income. But you seem to have done that a lot faster, and not that it's not possible, but it definitely takes a focus and dedication and probably some different strategies, right? Like you mentioned webinars, which means you're not just relying on people to come to your website and buy your product, but you're also reaching out to other people who have audiences and trying to get them on in sort of an affiliate relationship so that you can actually sell some copies as well, right?
Oh yeah, like trying to find the right partners is a ton of work. And I mean, you have to spend a lot of time reaching out to people and trying to find people who are relevant to your message. Like that's such a big portion of it is finding people that are like a good fit, because if you can get in front of the right audience, then that can make a big difference. The only other thing I'll say too is that I thought of it when you were mentioning this, is that and like I said, I'm still just getting started, but I think that a lot of success online, people who are really successful, it comes from finding one thing that works and then repeating that one thing a million times. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of times when you just get started with a blog or any site really, or really pretty much anything new, you're trying to figure out what works, and you try as much as possible. And that's what I did for the first 6 months or so. I just tried to get out there and see what will work, right? Try to be in as many places as possible, try as many things as possible. But once you figure out something that works, like do more of that. I was talking to Laura Roeder the other day, and she said a really interesting line that I think Dean Jackson told her, and he said, do more of what works, right? Like it sounds simple, but it's so easy for us not to do that. Like we can focus on so many different places that like capture your attention online or distract you. But if you figure out one thing that like works to drive traffic to your site or get subscribers or make sales, then just keep doing that. So like that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just trying to do as many webinars as possible.
So James, for people who are just starting out, let's say they're watching this and they are either just starting a new site with high hopes, or perhaps maybe they're restarting because they had tried before and failed. Can you give us just a couple of tips? What would you focus on most to set yourself up for success in the first 90 days or so?
So I think one thing from a site perspective, positioning is like so key. If you want a great example of positioning, check out Derek Halpern at Social Triggers. Like he did a great job of positioning his site in a unique way that also targeted something that people were really interested in. Like I think his feature box or his homepage says like, do you know what makes people tick online or something like that, right? So like, do you understand what makes people share your content and things like that, right? So if you can position yourself, and he's like, I'm not just another site that's telling you this is how you get people to your site, or this is how you make sales, but I use psychology or whatever to do it in a unique way.
Yeah.
So positioning is one thing. Like pick a big market and then think about how you can position yourself there. And then the other thing is relationships. Like that, just take some time to talk. Like this is an interview here, but we've talked on Skype like multiple times before. Like just get to know somebody and get to know people in your space, get to know people in the industry. I don't know. Those relationships are key. Like I'll give you a good example. So just the other day, I was talking to Sybil Chavis, who runs the Possibility Today, and she's awesome. Like go check her site out if you haven't seen it already. And we were talking. She's got a great story, and I just reached out and was like, hey, do you want to talk? Like I see that you're in the space, right? Just someone totally new that I hadn't talked to before. She does like personal development. It's not even really related to Passive Panda. But we talked more and more, and she's going to hook me up with a couple people that are really interested in stuff I'm interested in. And it's just great to have those connections, and you'll never know if you can like have that great stuff happen if you don't reach out to people. So the relationships are key. The positioning is key. And other than that, the number one thing I would say is just get started. Like so many people will be like, I wish I had more information. I wish I could, I don't have all the answers yet. I feel like I need more. The great thing about the internet is you can change stuff once you put it up, right? Like you can edit anything. If you write something this week and it doesn't work out next week, you can change it. So just get started and get after it. And I don't know, I feel like that's the best way to do it. Just get in there and start learning.
Awesome, James. Well, thank you so much. You always strike me as a guy who's just really genuine and willing to share all of the secrets as we talked about in the beginning. And I really appreciate it. I think everybody's going to really get a lot from this call. And I wish you all the success in the future and congratulate you on all the success you've had so far.
Yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. And thanks so much for talking today. If anybody's got any questions, just go to passivepanda.com or send me an email, look me up on Twitter. I'm always happy to talk.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks, Corbett.
All right. Bye.